Here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Thursday, March 19th. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here this morning. Lots of stuff that we need to discuss on today's show. Happy March Madness. The round of 64. It is here officially. Full slate of basketball games here, obviously today on a Thursday and tomorrow on a Friday. Looking forward to all the action. We'll see if we get any upsets, and we'll see if any of these local teams can advance or not around the state of Ohio. But appreciate everybody being here with us on today's show. We're going to do our second Bengals mock draft here today. So we did our first one, back in the beginning of February. So it's been about a month or so. Free agency, or obviously the main portion of free agency, has come and gone here in the NFL. So we can kind of look at this through a different lens now for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I've got my second mock draft that we will go through on today's show. Yesterday we talked about Paul Dehner Jr., his latest mock draft for The Athletic. I've got one here today, a bit of a different approach than what Paul did, and was very fortunate with the particular player that happened to fall to number 10. So I talked about this about a month or so ago. Eventually, we will do a mock draft, where that worst-case scenario mock draft, right, where none of the top targets are available for Cincinnati at number 10. Overall, was not the case for this latest one that I did today, so looking forward to going through all of those picks. Also, we've spent a great deal of time over the course of the past few weeks talking about Maxx Crosby, and want to spend some additional time on today's show talking about him as well. He since has recorded a podcast since his whole fiasco with the Baltimore Ravens, right? Got traded, 2 first-round picks going to Vegas. He was going to Baltimore. He shows up in Baltimore a couple of days after, because he had some previous requirements going on, and some weird stuff began to transpire in Baltimore as it related to Maxx Crosby and his status on the Baltimore Ravens football team. Ultimately, the trade doesn't go through. He goes back to Vegas, and it looks like he's staying put in Las Vegas. And after all that, he's not going to get moved, and will be back with the team that drafted him several years ago. So got some thoughts on the whole Maxx Crosby situation, because since he has spoke and as more time has continued to pass, it's becoming increasingly evident to me that Eric DeCosta and the Baltimore Ravens brass just got cold feet, right? The market for Trey Hendrickson was plummeting, wasn't what they expected when free agency commenced, and they say, you know what? We can get Trey Hendrickson for this number, get our first-round picks back, and we can just blame it on this medical. Ultimately, that's what ended up happening for the Baltimore Ravens, so we'll talk about that. Also, as I mentioned, got done with the first 4 in Dayton the past couple of nights. It's go time, round of 64. We're going to rank our top 10 players in this tournament to keep an eye on. And newsflash, lots of freshmen on this list, which if you paid any attention to college basketball throughout the duration of this year, that shouldn't surprise you in the slightest. So we're going to roll through that. Also, in yesterday's show, didn't have much time to talk about the WBC. The Americans lost to Venezuela. Have a couple of thoughts on that we will share if we have some time at the end of today's show. But as always, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. We hit 22,000 subscribers. Now we're well on our way to 23,000 subscribers here at the channel. So if you see anything that we do, don't just watch it. Make sure you're subscribed as well. Really helps us continue to grow what we're doing here at Chatterbox. Always like all of our stuff, too. If you're watching the video and you haven't hit that heart icon yet, go ahead and do that. That really goes a long way for us as well. But appreciate everyone for being here. Appreciate all of our sponsors that we've added here as well. QC Kinetix, Sharefax Credit Union, and, of course, 78 Cigars, which we will get to that in a second. But let's spend some time talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Free agency has come. Free agency has gone, at least the large chunk of free agency, right? That first week where all the good players, or the best available players, I should say, have already found new homes with teams across the National Football League. The Bengals were active early and then kind of stopped, and a late ad with Jonathan Allen. Overall, I will definitely give them a passing grade, but they needed to address all 3 levels of the defense. They failed to do that without adding a linebacker. So if they would have just added a linebacker, I'd be willing to give them an A. But it kind of feels like a C, right, considering that they weren't able to address such an important position, and a position that fell so short of the expectation and what was required in order for them to have a chance to play winning football and defense last year. That, of course, being the linebacker position. But that is come and gone. We'll see if they continue to make some additions over the course of the next several days and weeks into the summer months, potentially. But now I think since the large crop of free agency is done with, we can do another mock draft and kind of begin to evaluate what Cincinnati will do here when April rolls around next month. So let's get into this mock draft. We're going to roll through the top 9 picks, and then beyond that, I'm not going to, spend a ton of time saying, oh, all these guys were drafted before Cincinnati, made the selection. I use PFF, same thing I did a couple of weeks ago. You can do it. You need a premium account, though, to do a 7-round mock. You can do just a 1-round mock for fun. I'm sure there's free options out there, but I feel like PFF's there's not a perfect way to do this, and I've ran several simulations, and I've seen some stuff at the top, even in this one where I kind of scratched my head a little bit, so nothing's perfect, but this is the best one that I have come across with PFF. Vegas, Raiders, Mendoza, 1 overall. Don't really need to say anything other than that. We've had that conversation so many times here on the show. And this is where things got surprising immediately, as PFF, this mock draft, has the New York Jets selecting Jeremiah Love. As time has gone on, Combine has come and gone. I think it's become increasingly evident to me that Jeremiah Love is going to be a top 5, top 6 pick in the draft, but top 2 to a team like the Jets. We talked about this on yesterday's show with Miami. I give them credit because they're blowing this thing up, right? They're starting from scratch. They got new leadership in, new head coach, new GM. Let's just start over. The Jets should have done that multiple times throughout the duration of the past few years. They haven't, and when they have, they've done it sort of halfway, and then, of course, they failed on all the picks as well. This, to me, a Jeremiah Love selection of the Jets, it just feels like, one, they don't have an offensive line. Geno Smith's not a competent quarterback, and if you don't have an offensive line, you can't run the ball regardless of how talented you are, right? And this feels like a regime in Aaron Glenn that's kind of overstaying their welcome a little bit. I would have moved on after 1 year, but I think the writing's on the wall for them to get fired here after this year. So I don't think the Jets adding a running back really does much for them at this point. If I'm the Jets, I'm looking to add one of those stud defenders. Arvell Reese is certainly a name that pops immediately into your head. I think Love is worthy of going in the top 5. 2's aggressive, right? We saw it with Saquon Barkley. That obviously worked out in Philly, but it didn't initially work in New York. Why? Because the offensive line was bad in New York, and the organization top to bottom just was not in a good spot. So it's not like you're taking a quarterback here. A running back needs a lot of help around him, right? He can't just elevate everybody. If you put him behind a bad offensive line, he's in deep trouble. You saw that with Ashton Genty in Vegas this past year. So Love's a heck of a player, but to me that doesn't really make sense for the Jets. But anyway, just a mock draft. Sonny Styles, 3 of the Cardinals. When we did our first mock draft, I took Sonny Styles, but that was before the Combine, and I'm not convinced that he's going to be available anymore for Cincinnati. In fact, I would bet that he is not going to be available at number 10 overall. The Cardinals need a lot of help on defense. I could see them going with a weapon, maybe a Jeremiah Love if he's available, potentially a receiver at 3, but they need help on defense, and I think Sonny Styles certainly could provide that for Arizona. Arvell Reese, 4 to the Titans. If you're Bob Saleh, you're smiling ear to ear if ultimately that happens, right? I think he's a lock to go 2. I would take him 2 as a lock, but, maybe ultimately that isn't the case, but defensive-minded head coach and Robert Saleh, if he can land Arvell Reese at 4, I'm sure he'll be doing dances in circles in that war room for Tennessee. Reuben Bain, 5 to the Giants. According to this PFF simulation, they weren't scared about the short arms. You had Reuben Bain to that front for New York. That's why I always talked about the Giants being such a attractive job, and why John Harbaugh was like, yep, I'll go to New York. That's my first pick, and that's where I'm headed. They got players all over that team, really, but specifically all over the defensive line. And if you add Reuben Bain into the mix, look out if you're the Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, and Washington Commanders in that division, because they already got some formidable pieces along that defensive line. Sexy Dexy, obviously, and Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter, who, of course, they just drafted, and Brian Burns had a heck of a year, too. A lot of those guys got dinged up at the end, but if you can go into 26 in full strength and add a guy like Reuben Bain, look out if you're the opposing teams in the NFC East. David Bailey, 6 to Cleveland. That, to me, is interesting, because if Bailey falls to 6, Cleveland's probably sitting there going, oh, my goodness, how in the world is he available? But do they really want to add another defender? right? You know, it's one thing if they were more of a complete football team. They got a really good defense. Obviously, they're probably like, wow, if we can put him with Myles Garrett, look out. And that may be true, but you don't have an offensive line. You don't have a quarterback. You don't have skill guys. Your running back, who looked like a great pick in Judkins, snapped his leg in half. So you got all kinds of issues there offensively if you're Cleveland. And it would be hard to imagine that Todd Monken at that spot, his first pick. Obviously, it's not him calling the shots. It's the GM, Andrew Berry. But to go defense for Cleveland doesn't really make sense considering all the holes that they have offensively. But, yeah, I mean, if David Bailey's sitting there and you're picking a number 6, probably be difficult to pick somebody else. Mansour Delane, 7 to the Commanders. I think he's a good player. I think he's a lock to go in the top 12. We've talked about him potentially being available for Cincinnati. This feels maybe a bit rich taking him at 7, but the Commanders, that whole experiment with Marshawn Lattimore, that completely blew up in their face because Lattimore simply can't play anymore. They desperately need a corner, and if that's their guy over McCoy, obviously the medical probably makes them feel a lot better with the lane as it relates to McCoy, but I think, you know, corner could make sense for Washington at 7, especially, you know, if all those if Styles, Bailey, and Bain are all gone, then they're probably, you know, we talk about that backup plan for the Bengals all the time at 10, but if Washington sees those 3 guys gone, they're probably like, oh, shoot, maybe we need to reach a little bit here on a corner. But wouldn't surprise me either if they took Downs in that spot. Maui Noah, 8 to the Saints. That was interesting. Again, PFF Sim. I feel like the Saints have addressed their offensive line over the past couple of years. It's not perfect, but it's in a fine spot, I think, for Tyler Shuck. And me personally, I'd be trying to get him another weapon. You know, no receivers are off the board here at this point, but you don't want to force it and just take Carnell Tate because he's, you know, supposedly the top receiver. If you don't think he can be that guy, you don't think he can be a 1, which all his good years at Ohio State, he was never the 1, then I get it. But adding another tackle, I guess that's not a bad thing, but it feels like they had taken some steps in the right direction. They saw enough from Shuck where it's like, you know what, we're going to roll with this guy for at least a year, probably more, maybe get him another weapon. But ultimately they go with Maui Noah here. 9, Tate, Chiefs. They need another weapon, a cheap weapon to come in. You know, that Xavier Worthy thing, I remember it happened on draft night, and we were all like, oh, Lord. All right, Kansas City, Andy Reid, how did we let them get Xavier Worthy? Hasn't really done much, right? He's kind of just a gadgety guy. Hasn't really proven to be able to take the top off of defense. They haven't really connected on many deep shots with him. He's just kind of a trickster, reverse kind of guy, which, you know, they took him in the first round, so that's not the type of player you're looking for from a first-round pick. So I think Carnell Tate to the Chiefs makes a ton of sense. For Brett Veach, Andy Reid, and, of course, all those guys in Kansas City, which leads us to the number 10 overall selection, which we will get to in a moment, but not before we give a shout-out to our friends over at QC Kinetix. If knee pain or shoulder pain is slowing you down, slowing down your performance, whether it be on the golf course, the pickleball court, or even in the gym, talk to the care team at QC Kinetix Cincinnati about regenerative medicine options. Learn more at qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. The team over there is absolutely incredible. They have a location in Liberty Township right across from Lakota East High School. The folks at QC Kinetix bring a different approach with regenerative medicine. And you don't have to be an athlete. If you're just a weekend warrior here in Cincinnati dealing with back pain or trying to get ready for golf season, they can help. Check out the team at QC Kinetix and see what they're all about. Again, visit qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. Also, want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sharefax Credit Union. The Stone Shield Show is brought to you by Sharefax Credit Union. Sharefax is rooted in Cincinnati with 9 branches across the city. Sharefax is a not-for-profit financial institution owned by its members that returns earnings to them through lower fees and better rates in addition to traditional banking options. They have an auto promo going on right now offering 1.5% off your qualified rate when you refinance your vehicle with them. Your first payment isn't due for 90 days. Loan subject to membership and credit approval. Restrictions apply. Visit the website for terms and conditions. Go to sharefax.org or apply online or call 513-753-2440. Again, sharefax.org. Apply online or call 513-753-2440. And lastly, our friends over at 78 Cigars, Cincinnati legend Anthony Munoz has a new venture, and we're fired up to partner with it here on the Stone Shield Show. Introducing 78 Cigars, a premium cigar line from the Hall of Famer himself. If you love great cigars and Cincinnati football history, this is the perfect combination. You can grab 78 Cigars right now at both Montgomery Inn locations. That's the Boathouse and the original Montgomery Inn in Montgomery, and over at Creekside Cigar Co. Or check them out online. Just head to anthonymunoz.com and click on the 78 Cigars page to learn more and order your box today. That's 78 Cigars from the greatest offensive lineman to ever do it, Anthony Munoz. All right, at number 10 overall, Downs was available. Obviously, I took him here in this spot. It'll be interesting to see how he does the pro day at Ohio State. There's some of that knee stuff came up at the combine. He didn't do anything at the combine, so we really didn't get to gauge where he was at athletically. He spoke at the combine. I always have found him a very impressive human being when he's in front of a podium, in front of a microphone, right? I certainly think that's something that NFL teams really like. When they have a guy that's a mature guy that can go up there, show he's a leader, and it's all that intangible stuff, right? And that's what you're looking for in a top 10 pick, and I think Caleb Downs checks all those boxes. Other guys that were available, Dylan Thieneman, which I guess we can start to have that conversation. I've seen some mocks that have Thieneman go before Downs, which to me is outrageous, but I also think Dylan Thieneman's a lock to be a first-rounder. Top 15 pick, maybe a bit aggressive, but if you're Cincinnati, right, and let's say Downs is gone, and all the other guys that we mentioned, Styles, Bain, Reese, Bailey, guys like that are gone, and you don't feel good about those corners, do you take Dylan Thieneman? I'd be all right with a reach for Thieneman, opposed to a reach for a guy like Peter Woods, right, or Caleb Banks, or somebody along the interior. Again, it still feels a little bit rich, but it'd be interesting to see what would happen if Downs was not available. But Thieneman was available. Fano, right? But you just gave OBJ the extension, and Maxx Crosby is no longer Baltimore. Monroe Freeling, the other tackle, he's kind of seemingly cemented his spot, the kid from Georgia, as the third tackle in this draft. Kenyon Sadiq, tight end from Oregon, I had no interest there. Mekhi Lemon also available. Jermod McCoy, who you're going to start hearing that name a little bit more, especially his pro day is coming up on March 31st down in Knoxville. And if he looks good, there's going to be buzz about him coming here to Cincinnati, which scares me just because he didn't play it all last year for Tennessee. But if you're in a spot where all those guys are gone, I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world. Mesidor was available. To me, he's only going to be a first rounder because he played with Ruben Bain, right? And that's no disrespect to him, but he kind of feels more like an early round two guy. But I think you're going to see somebody take him in the top 20 just because those boys up front for Miami were elite. Keldrick Falk also available, which if you watched me at all, you understand that I don't have any interest at that, especially at that number 10 overall spot. But if you can get Caleb Downs at 10, we've said it before on the show, you're popping champagne, you're celebrating, you're fist bumping, you're high-fiving, all that stuff. It's a party on draft night if you're able to secure Caleb Downs at number 10 overall. All right, Bengals also have another pick, 41 in the second round. So let's just kind of go through. This is the only time we'll do it here for the second round. But the players that went before them in this PFF draft, I think it's worth mentioning. Lee Hunter, the other rusher from Texas Tech, had a great year. Wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if he went in the first round, but he's not going to get to the Bengals at 41. I would be surprised if he did. The Oregon guard, Emmanuel Pregnon, he goes 37. Chris Bell, wide receiver, Louisville, 38. He's had some injuries, but he's a dog. QC Concepcion, receiver from A&M, goes 39. Christian Miller, backer from Georgia, at 40. And you get to 41 for Cincinnati, that second-round pick. Several guys available. Caleb Lamu, he's the other Utah tackle. So you got Fano, and then the other side is Lamu, which that, to me, if you didn't just give OBJ that extension, I would be all over that at this spot here at 41 because I think he's a little bit raw, but if he wasn't quite so raw, I think he'd probably be a first-round pick, especially at that position. But I just don't think after that extension you can afford to do that with all the holes that you have defensively. So I passed on him. D'Angelo Pons is available. If you're a college football guy like me, you like him, but you also have to understand the size. Somebody's going to overdraft him. feels more like a third or fourth rounder. He'll probably be gone. I think he'd be available for Cincinnati here at this spot, but I think somebody else is going to take him, and I like him a lot. And he checks out, like, he'd start over JD at nickel, but I just don't know if it's worth a second-round pick on him, to be completely honest, although I love him in his game. Same with J-Rod for Texas Tech. Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker. Bengals could use, obviously, a linebacker, but as far as somebody that you're confident can come in and be that guy right away, it's definitely Sonny Styles. Can Jacob Rodriguez also be that guy? I'm not quite sure. And this was difficult for me. I've loved Jacob Rodriguez. I think you could argue he's the best defensive player in the country last year for Texas Tech. How is that going to translate to the NFL? I'm not positive. I thought about it. I ended up taking a couple of linebackers later, actually, in this draft. But I decided to go a different route. But I'm very much open to Rodriguez, but also kind of feels more like a third-round player than second-round guy. Mason Thomas, available, the edge at Oklahoma. Gabe Akis, edge from Illinois, took him in the last mock draft. Keontae Scott, the corner from Miami, all viable options, all guys that could potentially be selected by Cincinnati at 41 overall. But I went with Grayson Halton, defensive tackle at Oklahoma. Took him a little bit to get going from a production standpoint. First 2 years didn't do much, but stayed at Oklahoma, played all 4 years at Oklahoma, and in 2025 showed you what he was capable of doing. And I think the reason why I like him is his upside is pass rush, right? Bengals have not had that at that position since Geno Atkins walked out that door. And pass rushing DTs don't grow on trees, as we know. But I think he could be a guy that could come in here, and you could roll with BJ and Jonathan Allen on early downs, and then probably still Jonathan Allen on third down. But I think you could pair Grayson Halton with him on third down as a pass rusher, as a rookie, and I think you could have some good results if you're Al Golden. So that position's important. We've talked about this all week. Not a great year to need a DT. Bengals obviously need one even after the acquisition of Jonathan Allen. The crop of guys in free agency, it was JFM, and that was about it. Bengals were in on JFM. He ends up going to Tennessee with Robert Saleh. But beyond that, that was really it. And I thought it was a great get to get Jonathan Allen. But you talk about potentially taking a guy in the interior at 10, there isn't a guy that exists that you can do that with. We've entertained the idea of a Peter Woods reach. I certainly would not do it. Maybe the Bengals have other ideas. But just the need for a DT, I think you got to find a way to execute here in round 2, because there's a couple of guys that you can't take in round 1 but could be available here, and I think Grayson definitely is one of them. Grayson Halton here out of Oklahoma. There's a couple other guys that could fit that bill, but second or third round interior defensive lineman, try to shore up that position a little bit, and also put yourself in a spot where you can build for the future, because you've got guys on your interior in B.J. Hill and Jonathan Allen that are no spring chickens. Those guys are in their 30s, and that long-term outlook of that position does not look good right now for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I went with Grayson Halton at number 41 overall in the second round. Round 3, pick number 72 overall. Went with Romello Height. I was surprised to see him available in this mock draft. He is opposite of David Bailey. I mean, they had multiple guys, because Lee Hunter also was a rusher for them too. But Romello Height, I thought, really did a nice job for Texas Tech. Thought he played really well in the playoff game against Oregon. The reason Texas Tech lost that game was their offense, and Baron Morton and those guys couldn't get anything going. But I thought defensively in that game, that could have been a true blowout. But the defense of Texas Tech really kept him in the game. Bailey, Romello, Lee Hunter, Jacob Rodriguez, all those guys were flying around making tons of plays, and I was surprised to see him available here. But I'm also, you got to be cognizant when you're doing these that I understand you need to draft the player, but also I'm kind of trying to check off these positions too, right? Where I'm like, all right, safety, there we go. Caleb Downs, right? Interior defensive lineman, Grayson. Holton there at 41, and then 72, edge, Romello Height there at 72. So that was kind of my mindset as I'm doing this. But I think it's a great value pick. Wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't available in the third round. Showed a lot in college. But you had to add another guy in the draft to that room, right? You did good by bringing in Boye Mafe. There's your starter. But from a depth perspective, you got Cedric Johnson, who we like, 6th-round pick. I think you need to temper expectations a little bit with him. Shamar Stewart's kind of a wild card. You could get really good from him, and you also could get nothing at all from him. You need to add another guy in that room, especially if, Mafe is not the player that you were hoping that he could be. You got to add there high in the draft, right, within your first 3 picks, I think, at that edge spot. So I went with Romello Height. Also available, though, Josiah Trotter, linebacker from Missouri. You've heard some good things about him. But I'm just kind of, once you get past Sonny Styles, and then that next guy is Jacob Rodriguez, but I couldn't quite convince myself that he could be a guy to come in and be a 1 for you, then you're looking at somebody that you add here just to be competing to be a 2, right? And you got 2 guys that you don't even know if they can be 2s, right? And Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. So I just didn't see the value of adding 1 at this point of the draft. But, I get it, where if the Bengals don't add another linebacker here in free agency and you go through the first 3 rounds and they haven't selected a linebacker, everybody's going to be freaking out. I understand that, but that's just, unfortunately, kind of the position you put yourselves in when you opted not to address it in the first week of free agency. So I didn't go with Josiah Trotter. Who else we got here? Oh, this one. There's a couple receivers that were available here. Elijah Surratt out of Indiana. I love his game. And, he's not a first-rounder, probably not a second-rounder, but he can play ball, right? And he can catch the football, and he's versatile. He can run all the different routes. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he seems like a pro's pro. Somebody's going to get a really good football player when they draft him. And if you replace Yoshi with him, it's like, whoa, you might have something here offensively. So I sat and thought about it for a second. Also, by the way, Zachariah Branch from Georgia, the speedster, he was available here. So I thought about receiver for a second, but then I stayed disciplined and moved off it. But Surratt here in Cincinnati in the 3rd round, that'd be something to get excited about, but you just have too many other holes at this point. Anthony Hill, who Paul took yesterday in the 2nd round, he was available in the 3rd round here, which that makes more sense to me. I thought it was a bit of a reach taking him in the 2nd round, but, it's just fascinating. We'll talk about this as we get later in this mock. What do you do with guys that balled out as freshmen and sophomores in college, but then, I don't want to say regress, but their numbers went down and they didn't continue to build off what they had done the first 2 years? What do you do? Do you draft them based on how they performed as freshmen and sophomores, or do you look at what most recently happened on the football field? It's probably a combination of both, right? But I just had such high expectations for Anthony Hill his final year here at Texas, and he didn't meet him, right? And candidly, it wasn't close. But, I could entertain Anthony Hill in this spot. And then Dalen Everett, who I like from Georgia, he's a big game type player. Took him in the previous mock. He was on the board and potentially available as well. All right, so there's 3 guys. Safety check, DT check, edge check. What are we going to do about linebacker? Well, I addressed it here at 110. Obviously, this is the 4th round of the draft, so you can't say, this guy's 100% going to be a starter. Although, obviously, Barrett Carter is starter for Cincinnati currently. I went with Deontay Lawson out of Alabama. I was really impressed with his career at Alabama. He came in. He's one of the few Saban guys left that stayed through DeBoer. Had, serious injury a couple of years ago. Didn't look the same this past year. Kind of what I was talking about, with Anthony Hill, whereas he just started out and his career was so promising, and then you thought as his role increased and he was asked to do more, it was going to get better, but it just didn't really work out that way. But the leadership is a check for Deontay Lawson, and the size and the physicality is also a check. But is he quick enough to play at the NFL level, at a high level? I don't know. Good moments this past year. I think in a lot of ways he held that Alabama defense together. It wasn't a great unit. It hasn't been since Kalen DeBoer has been the head coach, but it improved from year 1 to year 2, and I think a lot of that has to do with Deontay Lawson, what he was capable of doing on the football field there for Kane Womack and those guys in Tuscaloosa. But, in the 4th round, I like Deontay Lawson to come in here, but it's just difficult when you take a guy in the 4th round. It's like, he might just be a special teamer or, you phase out. There's no guarantee that it's going to work out. But I think you got to roll the dice at some point on another rookie linebacker just because you have to add competition to that room, right? I know it's like, we don't want another rookie to play, but it can't just be those 2. You got to add some guys to the room. So I went with Deontay Lawson at 110. Corleone, the interior D tackle for UC, he was available at that spot. felt a little high for him. I feel like he's more of a 5th or 6th round guy. Landon Robinson also was available, who Paul took yesterday, DT out of Navy, who I like a lot, but he's a little bit undersized. So ultimately went with the linebacker and Deontay Lawson. Pat Coogan, took him again at 188. Bengals don't have a 5th rounder, so we're jumping the 5th round. 2 6th rounders, 2 7th rounders. Went with Pat Coogan. I mean, if he's going to be available, if great football players are going to be available that late, take him, right? You know, you can find centers late in the draft. You always have been able to do that. But he's a Rose Bowl MVP. He was the captain of the best offensive line in football. Do I have concerns about how he performed against an NFL-style defensive front in Miami in the championship game? Sure, but, you know, they won the game. He was fine enough, right? And you're taking him in the 6th round. I think you need to begin to ponder what you do after Ted Karras. And, you know, when you're in the 6th, 7th round, like you're trying to hit some flyers, right? You're trying to get some depth. Like you're not getting stars at this point in the draft. And I like Coogan. I like what he's made of. I like his leadership. And you took Matt Lee a couple of years ago, and I was excited when you took him. The buzz was high when you took him. We haven't heard really much since. Be interesting to see, you know, what they do behind Ted Karras here. But I think Pat Coogan's an option. And, you know, the Bengals have fallen back on this in the past. Guys that play at big-time programs, which a few years ago you'd laugh if you said Indiana's a big-time program. But they're the kings of college football. And clearly they know what they're doing. And Pat Coogan was a huge reason why they were able to do that. So taking a guy like that in the 6th round, I'm trying to bring more championship metal to Cincinnati. And looks like Duke Tobin and I are on the same page because he brought in Brian Cook and Boye Mafe. They got 3 rings combined, right? So I don't think it's a bad idea to add those type of players. 198. I added another linebacker here in the 6th round, Bengals' 2nd, 6th round pick. Harold Perkins, which if you watch college football, you remember Harold Perkins in 2022 was a freshman, and he was like one of the best players in the country. And I'm not going to say he had Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Smith type hype, but it was like, oh my goodness, like this guy has 2 more years of college football and is going to be a top 10 pick. And then they switched his position at LSU, which I thought was a little bit odd. They moved him to more off the line of scrimmage and like an outside linebacker type of position. I don't know exactly why. I don't have that information. But then he blew out his knee and then really was never the same ever since. As his junior year, he was only able to play like a handful of games, and then he played all last year, and it was just okay, hence why he's available here in the 6th round. But, I mean, could he add the weight and just be kind of a pass rusher? I don't know. You don't like him in coverage. I know that. But I think the Bengals could use a player like that. They need a linebacker that can actually play linebacker and be a combo linebacker. That's not him. But, you know, the reason we liked Caden Ellis so much in free agency was he could get after the quarterback. And I think Harold Perkins can still do that. You know, he lost some of that weight, his size, and can he do it against some of these big tackles in the NFL? I'm not sure. But to me, that's kind of a player where you saw flashes of greatness when he was early in his career. It's kind of what I was alluding to when I was bringing up Anthony Hill out of Texas. And, you know, could he tap back into that potential? Maybe. The position switch is weird. I don't have the details there on why that happened. But it's a 6th round pick. You can try to take a flyer in the 6th round, right? That's, you know, kind of part of it. And I do think there's a lot of upside there for Perkins, especially in like a smaller role where it's like 3rd, 4th down. We want you to just get after the passer. Maybe he could, you know, help the Bengals out there. And they could use all the help they could get when it comes to rushing the passer because it's been a reoccurring theme. Even when you had Trey Hendrickson, the sack king, on your team, and you still couldn't get to the quarterback beyond him, right? So to have another guy that could potentially get to the passer, I think would be advantageous. I went Harold Perkins at 198. 2 more picks. 221. Bengals have 2 7ths. Paul talked about this. I agree. Everybody you talk to that is a draft analyst, you know, covers the draft, covers college football, the NFL, whatever, they're all like, oh my goodness, this tight end draft is insane. Right, and I don't consider it a specific need for Cincinnati right now, but, you know, you got Mike Gesicki. He's in his 30s now. You got Drew Sample, who I like a lot and I think is incredibly underrated and undervalued. Zach doesn't undervalue him, but I think a lot of the fan base does. He's entering the final year of his contract. I would like to extend him. But and then Eric All, you saw flashes as a rookie, but the medical was an issue and you drafted him. That reared its ugly head. He missed all of last year. Not fair to the player to sit there and expect something from him. Like, if you get something from Eric All, great, but to sit here and expect him to fill some kind of role, that wouldn't be fair to him to do that. So, tight end's not an issue now, but looking down the road, it could be. And you want to take one of these guys late and, see if they can mess around and make the team, or you could potentially stash them on the practice squad for later. I think that certainly would be a good idea. And I went with Oscar Delp out of Georgia. Kirby Smart's always had some solid tight ends. Obviously, none greater than Brock Bowers, but I think that pairing with him and Lawson Lucky was, I don't want to say lethal, but it was productive for Georgia. And he can play. He's got an NFL body, and if he's available this late, I think you add him to the team and see what he's capable of doing. You tried to add a tight end late a couple of years ago with McLaughlin out of Arizona in the 6th round. Didn't work out. But I think there's a lot to like about Oscar Delp's game, and he could potentially be a guy that could help you out at that spot going forward. Lastly, 226, final pick in the 7th round. I went quarterback. Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks in the country last year. I think you need to begin to start doing this a little bit, where you're taking a guy in the 6th or 7th round at that position, because in a perfect world, you get Flacco back, right? But how much longer is he going to play? I mean, maybe like 3 years max, but that's max. Like it could very well, if you sign him, it's probably going to be a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal with some form of option after the first year. But I think you got to start thinking a little bit long-term, not to be the starter, obviously, but just who's going to be that backup to Joe Burrow. And eventually you're going to want it to be a guy on a rookie contract. That isn't just some bum, though, that you feel good about, playing. And Sawyer Robertson can sling it. He played for Leach, rest in peace, obviously, at Mississippi State, that air raid system. He was Will Rogers' backup for a couple years, didn't really get to play. Transferred to Baylor, actually had to sit there for a little bit too. Ultimately took over and went crazy when he had an opportunity. And he was a big-time high school quarterback from Texas, played in huge games. His cousin, I think, is actually Jarrett Stidham, and his dad got drafted in the MLB years ago. So he comes from a family of athletes. He will be, whether it be on a practice squad or a backup, he'll be on an NFL roster in some capacity. And I just like him a lot, and I think he could. I think his feet are kind of underrated. He's got to work on his deep ball a lot. But he can get the guy to the playmakers. He can get rid of it quickly, throw some interceptions certainly that need to get cleaned up. But he's a big guy too. Kind of has that NFL build to him, I would say. So I've always liked Sawyer Robertson a lot these past couple of years at Baylor. And if he's available when you're picking last in the 7th round, I think in a spot like that, you're just kind of taking a guy so you don't have to worry about the UDFA process where it's like, well, we got this 7th round pick. Let's just use it on this guy because, we might lose a UDFA that we want to obviously a different team. So Sawyer Robertson in the 7th round, if he's there, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then, ideally, Flacco's your backup. You cut Josh Johnson, and you keep Sawyer as your 3rd quarterback. And then when Flacco's done, he's your backup. That's kind of what the plan would be there. But I think it's time to start. Whether it be 6th or 7th round, not before that, but day 3, late day 3. Snag a quarterback, see what you got. Don't like him, cut him, try it again. Like him, all right, get him in a spot where you feel comfortable about him potentially being Joe Burrow's backup going forward. But there you have it. It's our mock draft. I can't decide if I like this one better than the first one or not. Just to recap here, let me just pull this up real quickly. I went Caleb Downs, safety, 10 overall. Ohio State got an A from PFF there. I don't know how it's not an A+, but whatever. Grayson Holden, 2. 41 overall, interior defensive lineman. I understand it's a bit of a risky pick, but I like the pass rush upside, and the Bengals need to add a body there. I got a D from PFF. Romello Height, edge, C+. 3rd round, Deontay Lawson, A. Linebacker, 4th round, Pat Coogan, B-, center, 6th round, Harold Perkins, C. Linebacker, 6th round, then 7th round picks Oscar Delp and Sawyer Robertson to round things out. But at the end of the day, if you get Caleb Downs, man, you got to hit on other areas of your draft, but as a fan, I know I'll just be excited about that. So there you have it. Our 2nd mock draft. We will probably do 2 more. We will probably do our oh crap, everything went wrong mock draft, where all the players that we could possibly imagine go off the board, and then you're looking at kind of something we talked about yesterday with McCoy or Delane, right? There might be a time where it's like, well, you got to pick one of the 2 corners. Who you going with? we'll do that. We'll have Joe Goodberry on as we get closer to the draft, get his thoughts on some of these prospects. Then we'll probably do one final one, maybe like a week or so before draft night. So that's kind of what is on tap as it relates to our coverage here of the NFL draft at the show. All right, so let's talk about Maxx Crosby a little bit. Got about 20 minutes or so left. We've spent a lot of time the past couple of weeks talking about Maxx Crosby, and that whole situation to me is fascinating because, he's a premier player in this league, one of the best players in the league, went for 2 first-round picks for a second. And, Baltimore technically didn't violate anything, right? I mean, we call it the legal tampering period, and we make jokes about it. I was making jokes about it, but it's not the league year has not begun. So nothing is set in stone until it was like Wednesday, right? It was a couple of days after. And, a lot of people are saying the Ravens are scummy or whatever, which, that's fine. I mean, we're in Cincinnati. You can call the Ravens whatever you want to call. But it's not going to prevent other teams from negotiating with Baltimore going forward so long as somebody has an asset or you have an asset that somebody else wants. Like, there's going to be negotiations that take place. But Maxx Crosby came out in the podcast and was kind of detailing what exactly happened. He said, the first thing he said was he got to the facility and he didn't see Jesse Minter and Eric DeCosta until like that night, which that to me is like there's alarm bells going off right there. If you trade for somebody, right, in the National Football League, or you pick somebody in the draft, we'll use that for an example because Cincinnati doesn't really trade for anybody, but they did trade for Flacco. Like, who is there when they show up? Like, Zach Taylor is right there. Right, and most people, the GM is right there. Is Duke Tobin there in Cincinnati? I'm not sure, but like in Philadelphia, Howie Roseman is greeting you as you arrive on property. And Maxx Crosby said that Minter and DeCosta, you didn't even see him when he first arrived in Baltimore. So that to me, alarm bells, something is off. And then ultimately, when he met him later that night, he said he could tell immediately the vibes were off. He was like, something was wrong here. And DeCosta was like, we really wanted this to work, but something came out. I got to be honest, something popped up in your medical, and, we don't feel comfortable making this transaction anymore. And, Crosby obviously said his heart dropped, and he was like freaking out, like, oh, my goodness. And Elitrash was his doctor, who we've talked about a lot on this show, one of the most famous doctors in the world, especially when it comes to athletes. He did Hunter Green's bone spurs, and it was he that said Hunter Green didn't need surgery last season, so he was worried about that, and he was like, oh my goodness, like, am I in a spot where it's going to hamper me and affect my long-term ability to play this game? So he said he was worried about that. But my takeaway when the second this thing happened was Baltimore got cold feet, and that to me is exactly what happened, right? And, again, they didn't do anything wrong, but they were looking around, and the Trey Hendrickson market was plummeting. Right? I mean, Trey Hendrickson, he was the top available free agent, and he didn't go in day one, right? So that means the price that he wanted versus what the rest of the league was saying he was worth, they were not adding up. In fact, they weren't close. So once Baltimore got wind of that, they're sitting there going, well, wait, we can get Trey Hendrickson, and we don't have to pay crazy amounts, and we can get our 2 first-round picks back, and we can just blame it on this medical? Sure, sign me up. And that's exactly what Baltimore did. So is it scummy? I mean, maybe, right? I mean, it's the NFL. It's how things work. They technically didn't do anything wrong, but at the end of the day, they were looking at it like, oh, we can get Hendrickson for, way less than we thought, and we can get our first-round picks back. Like, that's enough. And then they came out and said, oh, they were trying to add both. Yeah, right. Right? You weren't trying to add both Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson. Now, this is great news for the Bengals, as we've talked about, because this isn't me just being, picking on Trey Hendrickson, but like, he's not Maxx Crosby, right? Do you think he is anywhere near the caliber of player that Maxx Crosby is? No, he's not. He's a one-trick pony. He gets the passer, and that's about it, right? He's not setting the edge in the run game. There's no tackles for loss that aren't sacks, right? So he doesn't even compare. And if you're the Bengals, and Kelsey Conway reported this, she was like talking to people, players in the locker room, for Cincinnati, or people that are, players within the organization, and they were like, their overarching takeaway was like, yeah, it's weird or whatever that he's going to Baltimore, but we're just relieved that it's not Maxx Crosby over there anymore and that it's Trey Hendrickson. So I completely understand that, and I completely believe that to be true as well. But Baltimore knew, and whatever his obligations were, because Crosby, the deal went down, but he had something going on, so he didn't arrive in Baltimore for a couple of days. Is that ultimately what made this happen? Maybe. But the whole, it's his knee, we're worried about the medical. No. You realized you could get Trey Hendrickson for cheap and wanted your picks back, and saw that everybody was like, man, Baltimore giving up 2 first-rounders for a 28-year-old that's been hurt. And you said, actually, you know what, we're going to pass on this, and you blamed it on the medical, right? So a little bit sleazy, a little scummy, but at the end of the day, it's the National Football League, and technically they didn't do anything wrong, and Crosby's going to be fired up to get back on that field. And I don't know if the Ravens play the Raiders, but if so, that'll be fireworks if that's the case. And if you're Maxx Crosby, you got to be fired up because he never wanted to leave Vegas to begin with, and nobody was more aggressive in free agency than Vegas. And you're going to get Fernando Mendoza, so is it going to equate to wins here in 25, or excuse me, here in 26? No, but could it equate to wins in 27? I think that could potentially be a possibility. So thought it was interesting, though, that he came out and was like, yeah, vibes are off. And that, to me, is just like, yeah, they got cold feet, right? They blamed it on the medical, right? But at the end of the day, they just didn't want to go forward with the deal anymore. All right, college hoops. The tournament is here. Round of 64 games all day today, all day tomorrow. Ohio State plays TCU here, which that's just a banger to start. Obviously, it's 8-9. It's always 8-9 to start the first game. But I don't know. Jamie Dixon does a heck of a job. Ohio State's hot, right? Diebler saved his job, and that's like, we're going to go on a tear and be, an 8 seed in the tournament and be favored in round 1. So I give him credit for that. Give credit to Bruce Thornton because he's been around there forever, and he hasn't been in the tournament since now. And I don't know if necessarily he's a winning player, but he can score, that's for sure. And they've got some size, some bigs that are playing decent right now, so we'll see how it goes for them. They'll have a size advantage in the game against TCU. So, Bearcats obviously had an opportunity against TCU, weren't able to capitalize. And we'll see if Ohio State's able to do that. But great first game here to start. But I do want to dive into these top 10 players in the tournament here. And it's just according to me. We'll just go 10-1 here on, in my opinion, the best players. I think a lot of these guys are going to make runs, whether it be to the Elite Eight or even beyond into the Final Four. Honorable mentions. Christian Anderson writes, I think there's a world where they go on a run, Texas Tech, and they don't have a chance to win it anymore without Toppin. When he went down, he's their best player, and that was rough for them. But Christian Anderson as a freshman, you saw the talent, but he just had to work on his shot a little bit, just be a little bit more consistent. He was able to do that. Now he's a real player, but he was still kind of second fiddle to some degree to Toppin. Well, now it's his show, right, as a sophomore, and he absolutely, I think Akron has life against them in the opening round, but if they beat Akron and Bama without Holloway, they could find themselves in the second weekend, no problem. And then when you get to that second weekend, as Travis Steele has said, anything can happen, right, in the tournament. So he's an honorable mention, probably belongs on this list. I didn't quite get him on. He's a good player. And then Joshua Jefferson for Iowa State. He's a really good player. They've got some other guards on that team that are really good, but in my opinion, Jefferson's kind of their X factor that keeps them together. I think they could go on a run, right, in that region with Michigan as the 1. And might be a hot take, but in my opinion, Michigan's the most vulnerable 1 seed out of the 4. I know Duke's banged up, but I still trust Shire more in the tournament than Dusty May. Obviously, Dusty May's had success in the tournament. I'm just saying comparatively, I'd probably still trust Duke a little bit more. But I think Iowa State could potentially go on a run. Last year, maybe like a year too early type thing. Just, hadn't been there with Otzelberger and got bounced earlier than they should have. But I think they got an opportunity to go on a run. Joshua Jefferson might belong on this list. He's an honorable mention. 10, Thomas Houck, Florida. I said on the show, and I guess I'll stick with it, I actually, have not filled out a bracket yet. I'm getting ready to do that right now. I hate doing chalk. Like, I love to pick somebody that's, not a 1 seed to win. Florida, the tear they'd been on the past month and a half has been insane, but they got smacked by Vandy in the tournament, which was a little bit odd. But I like Florida's a very talented team. They got some NBA players on that team. And they got a lot of guys back from last year, and they obviously won the title last year. But Houck, I think, he was a rotational guy last year. Well, now he's their leading scorer, right? And he's got size. He can shoot it. Florida's been struggling shooting the ball, right? They're kind of on a cold streak shooting the basketball. That's got to get cleaned up. But he's versatile. He's big enough to defend, too. He's going to be a first-round pick. Thomas Houck's a really, really good player. I've got him at 10. 9, Yaxel from Michigan. I don't like him. You don't like him, but he's a good player. I think he's their most important player. I don't know if their guard play is good enough to get them to the Final Four, but since moving him, he comes in from UAB, probably the best transfer, one of the best transfers in the country, and goes from the 5 to the 4. That's opened up a lot of stuff for Dusty May in Michigan. So, he's not the most likable guy in the world, but he belongs on this list, right? I think if you're putting a Michigan guy on this list, it's got to be him. At 8, Jaden Bradley, dog. Point guard for Arizona. Arizona's got so much youth on that team. They play like 3 freshmen. I think they start 3 freshmen. But Jaden Bradley has been there for several years, transferred from Alabama a couple of years ago. He's just a leader. He takes care of the basketball. He can defend. He's clutch. Had a game winner in the Big 12 tournament. That was unbelievable, where he just kind of, was driving down the right side and didn't really get the best look in the world, kind of just fading away, elevated, and just knocked down the shot, which was pretty incredible to see. But I think Jaden Bradley's a heck of a player. As far as like NBA guy, like a lot of these guys are like NBA guys. Don't look at Jaden Bradley that way, but as far as an elite college basketball player that can carry this team to a national championship, absolutely, Jaden Bradley belongs on this list. Have him at number 8. 7, LeBaron Philon, Alabama. I think he could have left last year and probably been a first-round pick, but I don't think he would have been a lottery pick. Complete. I mean, nobody's complete at 18 years old, but really good player, just couldn't shoot well enough, and he came back to school, play for Nate Oates. I'm sure he got a bag, and it's like, we got to work on the shot, and he was shooting like, I don't know if it was like 30% from 3 last year, and he's like all the way up to like 40%. So, I mean, he's going to be a lottery pick. He's a really, really good player. Might be without his running mates in Aiden Holloway. Don't have the details as we're doing this now, but that hurts Alabama and their ability to win the national title, obviously. But it's not like they lost Sherelle, right? Or even Amari Allen to an extent, right? So he's a great player. He's one of the best shooters, Holloway, when he's on. But Philon's role is going to change here, and he can't afford to have a game where he's just so-so. Like, he's got to be really good. Maybe not against Hofstra, but beyond that, if they're going to beat Tech and go on a run in this thing, he's got to be really, really good. And he has the ability absolutely to do that. He's going to be a lottery pick. 6, Braden Smith. I think, look, Braden Smith has had one of the best college careers you could imagine, point guard for Purdue. But Purdue came into the year, they were the number 1 team coming in, and he was preseason Wooden Award winner, right? And obviously Purdue's not the number 1 team, and he's not going to win the Wooden Award. He needs to score a little bit more in this tournament. He's so unselfish, a pass-first guy. He just understands the game so well, and I think that's really going to bode well for Purdue in March. Obviously, they are no stranger. Matt Painter getting upset in this tournament. Obviously went on the run to the title a couple of years ago before losing to Dan Hurley. But Braden Smith knows how to play in this tournament. He knows how to win in this tournament. I would expect him to play his best, even though the past few weeks haven't been what they had expected, and certainly the season as a whole hadn't been what Purdue expected. But it's all right there ahead of him, right? They've got, they got a reasonable seed here to go do some serious damage, and Braden Smith's a heck of a player. Again, is he an NBA guy? No. I mean, he'll be on a team, I'm sure. But he's an elite college basketball player, and despite, him falling short of the sky-high expectations that were, associated with him going into this year, he's still on this list. Number 6, Braden Smith. Get ready for a lot of freshmen. Number 5, Kingston Flemings. I like Kelvin Sampson a lot. Flemings, out of the 3 freshmen, was like the lowest rated recruit. Well, he's the best one, and he's getting picked first out of those guys from Houston. Just a mature guy, which you got to be to play for Kelvin Sampson. He can do it all. He can score. He can defend. And I didn't realize he could get up like that, too. I saw him throw it down on somebody a week or 2 ago, and I was like, what in the world's going on? But Kingston Flemings is a dog. And that's the thing with these freshmen is a lot of them haven't blinked throughout the duration of the year. How are they going to show up in this tournament? I don't know. right? But Houston, they don't have as good of a team as they did last year, but they still have some of those guys back. Obviously, with Sharp and Uzan, and adding a freshman like Flemings into the mix, they're going to be a problem in this tournament. Got him at 5. 4, Darren Peterson. Oh, how the heck is he as low as 4? He should be all the way up at number 1. I need him to play, right? So I saw ESPN had him outside the top 10. Which, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Is he going to finish the game? Is he not going to finish the game? Is he going to pass the ball? Probably not. But is he going to just carry and be super efficient when he's out there? Probably. I just need to see more consistency. He's usually at his best when the lights are the brightest, so I would imagine he's going to play in the tournament, but we just don't know. There is a whole world of unknown, and whoever is picking first in the NBA draft, boy, do they have a difficult decision to make. There are several guys that are worthy of that pick. I think Peterson's clearly the most talented. But is this him not wanting to play? Is he just wanting to get ready for the NBA, or is this going to be a problem when he's in the NBA? I don't know. But it is very, very weird. And it started out at the beginning of the year, and it was like, okay, this is kind of, not off a little bit. Now it's just weird. It is fully 100% weird. And we'll see what his availability is like in this tournament. I have no clue. But the talent obviously is there. Darren Peterson at 4. Boozer at 3. Again, you might make the argument he should be higher. I don't trust him enough on defense. I think people knock him because he's not like the best athlete in the world. He doesn't have to be. Like, he had one of the best high school careers ever in the history of high school basketball, and has come in here and has not missed a beat. Duke lost 2 games. He's their best player. They go to him when it's close late. I just don't trust him fully on the defensive side of the floor, and I think there's going to be some serious growing pains at the NBA level. Defensively, obviously his dad's Carlos Boozer, so he should be able to figure out that side of the floor. But we'll see. And the talent's clearly there, but he might be asked to do a lot. If they're without Gangba and Foster, and he's out there with his brother Caden, which is pretty cool that they're both playing now that they've had those injuries. He obviously belongs on this list, but the defensive limitations, it's not the lack of athleticism. That's ridiculous for me to say lack of athleticism, but he's just not. Like, Paolo is a little bit more athletic than him. And Paolo's not the most athletic guy in the world, right? But that's kind of seemingly the comparison to some degree when you're thinking about Duke players, right? So he's just not quite as fluid as maybe you would like. But he's a heck of a player. He plays at his own pace, controls the game, seems to be a good leader. Everybody says he's a great kid. It's just defensively is why I have him at 3. 2, Debanza. When Richie Saunders went down, you saw Debanza elevate his game. And we'll see. BYU very well could be a one and done. I think they got Texas, right? So they could be done after one game. But Debanza, to me, has separated himself a little bit from the rest of those guys at this point. But I think he's a heck of a player. He's a complete player. He can shoot it. He can get to the rim. He can defend. He can do it all. All these guys can do it all. And at number 1, I got Darius Acuff Jr. That boy is a dog, right? That dude is an absolute dog. I am hoping Arkansas can go on a bit of a run. I think it'd be cool to see Calipari go on a run. I'm a big Calipari guy. I think UK looks stupid for how they handle that, and they were just like, yeah, you know what, we're done. He's like, yeah, you know what, I'll go to Arkansas year 1. I'll go on a run in the tournament. Year 2, I'll win the SEC tournament. And I think they're poised for potentially a run here. They got Hawaii to start. But John Calipari has coached some elite guards. SGA, Devin Booker, Derrick Rose, Tyler Ulis. The list goes on and on. There's so many guys that I'm not even saying. Shoot. I mean, you could literally – it's not even just the guards that he's coached. You could just go through all of these NBA rosters with the guys that Coach Calipari has coached. And, Jamal Murray, right? John Wall. It just goes on and on. And the guy's absolutely unbelievable with developing these young guys. And Acuff seems to be the next guy on that list. And, I don't just want to throw out the name Kyrie Irving like that. I understand Acuff's bigger than Kyrie Irving, but as far as like going left and right, and you can't really tell because he's basically ambidextrous and can do it either way and can shoot from the outside, crazy handles. Like, there's some Kyrie Irving in his game. And he also will yam on you, too. So he's just unbelievable. And don't sleep on Arkansas. Some of those guys have some experience winning games in the tournament last year, and I look at them as very, very dangerous here in the month of March. But that's my list. A-Cup, I think, is unbelievable, and he's going to be a top pick in the NBA draft. He's not going to go as high probably as DeBanza and Peterson, but he's the real deal, and he's the next great John Calipari guard. But before we get out of here, do want to give a shout-out to our friends over at Homage and let you guys know about this little deal that we got going on. Chatterbox Sports is proud to partner with Homage, and we've got a special deal for you. The first 100 listeners get 20% off site-wide. That includes all the great T-shirts, sweatshirts, and everyday gear you see. Just note, a few exclusions do apply, like starter jackets and some of the new Heights gear. Really like their red stuff. Wearing the Miami shirt right now. Got great Bengals stuff over there, too. Just their local Cincinnati collection really is awesome over that Homage. Quality's great. It lasts for a long time, and it's incredibly comfortable, certainly as well. To get your 20% off, use promo code CHATTER at checkout. Just go to homage.com/cbox. That's CHATTER at homage.com/cbox. Lastly, here quickly on the WBC. Good for Gino that he comes up with that big of a hit. Very disappointing for the Americans. I'm not going to say embarrassing, but it's a tournament that they need to win, especially after beating the Dominicans. Again, not taking anything away from Venezuela. They're a good team, but you look at that lineup, it's like, good Lord. And your offense was non-existent throughout the most important part of the tournament. And I get it's baseball, right? And I get the pressure that comes with it, and there's a reason why the World Series is 7 games and not 1. I get all that. And, the pitching is what it is. You're never going to have elite arms. None of the teams are. But, Judge kind of disappears again. Schwarber, nothing. Guys up and down that lineup. Roman Anthony had a good run, but ultimately in the final game, not able to do much. Bryce Harper, you talk about moments in sports where they're just elite moments that won't get talked about and discussed because of the result. That home run from Bryce Harper is one of the top things as far as recent memory that will be on that list, because 8th inning, down 2, couldn't get anything going offensively. You wouldn't have been surprised in that moment if we had lost 2-0. And then he says, I'm going to play long ball to straightaway center field to tie up the game. Just full body chills in that moment when Bryce Harper did that. So he's a certified gangster for that. But ultimately, Suarez, the next inning, double. They're up 1, and that was that. So just the guys that they had on that team, the lineup in which they had, it's disappointing, right? And Bill Smith on that team as well from the Dodgers. I mean, the lineup was just completely loaded, and just to score that few runs it's not great. It's not great. So we'll wait till the next one and see if who's all ready to go. But a good experience for those guys to be on the team and get those kinds of reps. Obviously, wish. There's not really a red that would fit that description for Team USA, I guess. But, that's like postseason reps right there for those guys. And Aaron Judge is getting picked on again for no showing, but that to him that's another postseason rep. That doesn't feel any different than, a Yankee game in the NLC or the ALCS, right? That's a very, very valuable rep. So disappointing it ended the way it did. Feel good for Gino. He was spreading the word after winning the game, which I certainly can respect and appreciate that. Seems like an all-time great guy, and we're certainly fired up to have him back here in Cincinnati. Hopefully it can lead to some late-game heroics, some extra base hits, and certainly some balls over the fence. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate everybody sticking around, hanging out. Appreciate our sponsors, QC Kinetix, 78 Cigars, Sharefax Credit Union, all for being on board here at the show. And until tomorrow, take care, everybody.